Hello friends, in this video I am talking about Spain agriculture. Let's start. Agriculture in Spain is important to the national economy. The primary sector activities accounting for agriculture, husbandry, fishing and silviculture represented a 2.7% of the Spanish GDP in 2022, with an additional 2.5% represented by the agri-food industry. Spain is one of the largest countries in Western Europe, and it ranks second in terms of its elevation. After Switzerland, most of the territory experiences a dry summer climate, Mediterranean or semi-arid with scarce rainfall in the summer and high potential evaporation, as well as a total annual rainfall ranging from 400 to 600 millimeters. Longer droughts also occur, although average minimum winter temperatures are often above 0 degrees Celsius in a large part of the agricultural land. Frosts are not uncommon. In the interior of the country during the winter, 20.6 million of Spain's 50.5 million hectares of land, or about 40%, is suitable for cultivation. The soil is generally of poor quality, and about 10% of the land can be considered excellent. The roughness of the terrain has been an obstacle to agricultural mechanization and to other technological improvements. Furthermore, years of neglect have created a serious land erosion problem, most notably in the dry plains of Castilla-La Mancha. Among the European Union countries, Spain has the second largest proportion of land devoted to agricultural purposes, only behind France. In the 1980s, about 5 million hectares were devoted to permanent crops, orchards, olive groves, and vineyards. Another 5 million lay fallow each year because of inadequate rainfall. Permanent meadows and pasture land occupied 13.9 million hectares. Forests and scrub woodland accounted for 11.9 million hectares, and the balance was wasteland or was taken up by populated and industrial areas. The primary forms of property holding in Spain have been large estates, latifundios, and tiny land plots. In large measure, this was still true in the 1980s. The agrarian census of 1982 found that 50.9% of the country's farmland was held in properties of 200 or more hectares, although farms of this size made up only 1.1% of the country's 2.3 million farms. At the other end of the scale, the census showed that 61.8% of Spain's farms had fewer than 5 hectares of land. These farms accounted for 5.2% of the country's farmland. Just under 25% of all farms consisted of less than 1 hectare of land, and they accounted for 0.5% of all farmland. Minifundios were particularly numerous in the north and the northwest. Latifundios were mainly concentrated in the south, in Castilla-La Mancha, Extremadura, Valencia, and Andalusia. Crop areas were farmed in two main manners: areas relying on non-irrigated cultivation, which made up 85% of the entire crop area, depended solely on rainfall as a source of water. They included the humid regions of the north and the northwest, as well as vast arid zones that had not been irrigated. The much more productive regions devoted to irrigated cultivation, regadío, accounted for 3 million hectares in 1986, and the government hoped that this area would eventually double, as it already had doubled since 1950. Particularly noteworthy was the development in Almería, one of the most arid and desolate provinces of Spain, of winter crops of various fruits and vegetables for export to Europe. Though only about 17% of Spain's cultivated land was irrigated, it was estimated to be the source of between 40 and 45% of the gross value of crop production and of 50% of value of agricultural exports. More than half of the irrigated area was planted in corn, fruit trees, and vegetables. Other agricultural products that benefited from irrigation included grapes, cotton, sugar beets, potatoes, legumes, olive trees, strawberries, tomatoes, and fodder grasses. Depending on the nature of the crop, it was possible to harvest 2 successive crops in the same year on about 10% of the country's irrigated land. Citrus fruits, vegetables, cereal grains, olive oil, and wine, Spain's traditional agricultural products, continued to be important in the 1980s. In 1983, they represented 12%, 8%, 6%, and 4%, respectively, of the country's agricultural production. Because of the changed diet of an increasingly affluent population, there was a notable increase in the consumption of livestock, poultry, and dairy products. Meat production for domestic consumption became the single most important agricultural activity, accounting for 30% of all farm-related production in 1983. Spain produced, in 2018, 9.8 million tons of olives, largest producer in the world, 9.1 million tons of barley, fifth largest producer in the world, 7.9 million tons of wheat, 19th largest producer in the world, 6.6 million tons of grape. 4th largest producer in the world, behind China, Italy and USA, 4.7 million tons of tomato. 8th largest producer in the world, 3.8 million tons of maize, 3.6 million tons of orange. 6th largest producer in the world, 2.8 million tons of sugar beet, which is used to produce sugar and ethanol, 2 million tons of potato. During the mid-1980s, Spanish agriculture was roughly self-sufficient in years when there were good harvests, and in nearly every year there were sizable surpluses of olive oil, citrus fruits, and wine that could be exported in quantities large enough to make it the EC's third largest food supplier. In years of poor or average harvests, the country was obliged to import grains for use as animal fodder. But on the whole, Spain was a net exporter of foodstuffs. Spanish agriculture varied considerably with regard to regional differences in output. Some regions were distinguished by a highly inefficient variety of farming. Specialists estimated that areas dominated by minifundios would have to lose an estimated 3/4 of their farming population if they were to compete effectively with foreign producers. The variety of agriculture practiced along the Mediterranean coast or in the Rio Ebro Valley was, however, highly efficient and capable of keeping up with foreign competition. Opinion was not united as to what EC membership would eventually mean for Spanish farmers. The EC's Common Agricultural Policy, which aimed at supporting most of each member state's farming sector, was expensive, and by the 1980s it was consuming well over half of the organization's revenues. If the cap were continued, it would not be likely to have a considerable effect on Spanish agriculture, for a system of domestic price supports had long protected the weaker parts of the nation's farm sector. A change of EC policy that encouraged a single community-wide agricultural system might allow those parts of the Spanish agricultural sector that outperformed their rivals in the EC to prosper, while backward branches would probably disappear. Spain has long been Western Europe's leading producer and the world's foremost exporter of oranges and mandarins. In the early 1960s, the production of these commodities averaged 1.8 million tons a year, and by the 1980s the annual yield averaged about 3 million tons. Grapefruit, lemons, and limes were also grown in quantity, but Spain was second to Italy among West European producers of these fruits. Spain's citrus groves, all under irrigation, were concentrated in Mediterranean coastal province, the Levante, primarily in a narrow coastal strip 500 kilometers in length, extending from the province of Castilla to the province of Almeria. Some citrus fruit production also was found in Andalusia. Nowadays, citrus production is still important, and Spain is by far the biggest producer of citrus in Europe and one of the biggest in the world. In 2022, the government of Andalusia provided a mandate for the European Investment Bank to establish and operate an innovative guarantee fund of up to 50 million euros in order to support the growth of its agricultural and agri-food industries. The Andalusia Regional Government and the European Agricultural Support for Rural Development jointly fund the guarantee fund. Spain's other significant orchard crops were apples, bananas, pears, peaches, apricots, plums, cherries, figs, and nuts, except for bananas, which were grown only in the Canary Islands, and figs, which were grown mostly in the Balearic Islands. Orchard crops were produced primarily in the Levante and in Catalonia. The Catalan province of Lerida was the leading producer of apples and pears, and it ranked second to Murcia in the production of peaches. Almonds, grown along the southern and the eastern coasts, emerged as another important Spanish cash crop. Almost half of the 1985 crop was exported, approximately 70 to 75% of it to EC countries. I hope everyone enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe this channel for more videos. Please like, comment, and share. Thanks.